Tonight, drunk. I knew.
Hello, SkepticalRoot, here again. This time, as promised, I'm going to be addressing the moral argument for God, or moral argument for the existence of God. Going down my list of 20 arguments for the existence of God from Peter Kreeft's website. And if you don't know who Peter Kreeft is, he is, according to his website, Peter Kreeft, PhD, is a professor of philosophy at Boston College. He loves his 5 grandchildren, 4 children, 1 wife, 1 cat, and 1 God. His 75 books include Handbook of Christian Apologetics, Christianity for Modern Pagans, Fundamentals of Faith. Well-published apologist. And I'm going with his list because it's a complete list, relatively speaking, of the arguments that I've heard for the existence of God. And I'm going to sit here and go through every single one of them, all 20 of them at some point. I've done Pascal's wager, and I wanted to go with the moral argument next because of my last video. So, what is the moral argument from God? The moral argument, according to this website here, actually, you know what? I'll stop and I'll go back because the argument as he poses it here is slightly different from the moral argument listed on the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy and or Wikipedia, which have the same 3 premises for the moral argument from God, which are as follows. Number 1, a human experience of morality is observed. Number 2, God is the best and only explanation of this moral experience. And 3, therefore, God exists. Peter Kreeft, however, words it this way. Real moral obligation is a fact. We are really, truly, objectively obligated to do good and avoid evil. 2, either the atheistic view of reality is correct or the, quote, religious one. Number 3, but the atheistic one is incompatible with there being moral obligations. And number 4, therefore the religious, in quotes, view of reality is correct. Now, broadly speaking, the first premise is really where this falls on its head. Although I will point out both Peter Kreeft's 2 and 3 and the standard arguments 1 and 2, or I should just say 2, show that 3 does not follow. Basically, real moral obligation is a fact. Well, it's not a fact. It is observed, but what are the real moral obligations? Where is it that there is this innate sense of being social creatures and having a joined experience in the world that makes us say that there is an objective moral obligation? There isn't. We aren't born moral. Some people have greater tendencies towards social group structures than others, but and purely anecdotal, non-scientific. I have never met a child, including my own, that I did not have to teach morality to. Don't hit your brother. You can't throw things when you're mad. You can't always have what you want. Sometimes you've got to share. You've got to be nice to other people. Growing up, hey, it wasn't very nice to cut the head off that frog. Things like that. It is all learned. None of it. We are not born with this information. We learn it through socialization within social groups, and we learn it from the perspective that people who have survived so far have decided that there are rules that they follow, which make getting along with other people better. Don't kill people. Don't take their stuff. Don't assault people because they have something you want. Don't lie or perjure yourself for the purpose of acquiring something or avoiding social or ethical, obligations to society. We have to learn all this stuff. There's nothing in us that says innately we have to do these things. Nowhere on my heart is it written God's word. Using that in context of the moral argument. In the cases where children have been isolated from society, growing up in abusive households or things like that, these children come out of the experience not understanding these things, and they have to learn that, when they're older or as adults. And there is a certain age by which, once you get past this point, it becomes exponentially harder to learn these types of things. If we don't learn them when we're young enough or at a certain age or by a certain age, it becomes harder and harder and harder to ingrain these in our daily lives, so that we get to the point where we don't hit people when we get mad. We don't not kill people because they did something we didn't like. Things like that. There are actual social consequences within any state that the state can take action against someone who misbehaves in such a way. And that's where we get that stuff. If you go back to the moral laws in the Bible, of course, everybody points to slavery, which is a perfectly valid example of something that is considered moral at the time, at the times of the writing of the Bible and the Quran and the Torah. Perfectly acceptable to own other people as property. We don't consider that to be true now, and thus we don't do that to people. That's something that's not, that moral law is not innate to us. We have decided that this is immoral. The Peter Craif's second one, either the atheistic view of reality is correct or the religious one is a non-starter, because it doesn't outline what that is. And granted, the way that this first premise is worded, it kind of needs to be, whereas the general form of the moral argument, God is the best and only explanation for this moral experience, doesn't require explaining what the religious or the atheistic view is. The truth of the matter is that from what we know about people need to learn this stuff. They don't just have it. It's not part of them. Some people pick this up at an earlier age. Some people don't pick this up until much later, or if at all, some of these moral constraints. Specifically the ones that revolve around functioning within a social group. There are moral constraints within the religious context, and this is the Abrahamic religious context, about adultery or sex or masturbation or that type of stuff. And how do people pick that up on their own? They don't. I mean, we're sexual creatures, if you will. And when we go out into the world, without anybody ever telling us not to do this stuff, we do this stuff. And when we get to a certain age, and boys get into their 12, 13, 14 years old, 11, sometimes as late as 15, they start tugging on their knob, and unless someone steps in and says God doesn't like that, they'll continue to do it, probably for the rest of their life, sex notwithstanding. Having multiple sexual partners, that's, again, normal part of humanity. Unless someone comes from a religious context, they are not necessarily likely to follow that moral precept. And we see this in cultures where they don't have these particular moral laws or specific biblical moral laws or Abrahamic laws. And they seem to get along okay because it's part of their social structure. Morals are social rules for how we treat one another and how we do things in public, basically. It's not about, what I feel is right, because we have to learn that things are right and have to learn things like empathy. If we don't have it, if it doesn't develop naturally and we tell people, hey, you shouldn't punch people because how would you like it? Some people that clicks with them right away. Some people say, well, they should just toughen up. I'm okay if you hit me if I do something wrong, but socially, that's not acceptable. So they have to learn that in order to be functional members of society, that's not acceptable. And in places where, even with strong religious traditions, that say things like, don't hit other people. If they don't listen to it, they don't listen to it. Clearly showing that this is not an innate thing. There is not a moral lawgiver who is telling us that this is the right thing to do. Because if there was, we probably wouldn't need some guy a long time ago to write it down so that other people could find out about it. It would be innate in everybody, and it's not. I honestly think that the moral argument, it's kind of a stupid argument, because we can look at how human beings are and not see the same moral behaviors that being acceptable across different social groups. Nazis are a good example of that. People raised primarily as Catholics in Germany still went on to, and it wasn't the entire country, but a large portion of the country was well behind the execution of Jews. But thou shalt not kill is one of the moral absolutes that they would point to. Well, I can tell you, if somebody is, coming at me with a gun or a knife, and I have a gun, and I shoot and kill them because I know that they intend to do me harm, I'm not, I don't have any kind of moral quandary over that. I had to protect myself, or I had to protect my family, or something like that. There's no innateness to it. So that in itself refutes God is the best and only explanation of this moral experience. It's even if there were, as I said in my last video, or my other moral video about moral asymptotes, even if there is some asymptotic value for morality, it's unachievable. We can never get to the value of x squared on the curve, or x to the fourth. It's an asymptote. It reaches that value at infinity. So, like I used in that video, not about not killing, not killing what? The more simplistic it gets, the closer you get to the point where if you can't kill anything, you can't eat, and if you can't eat, then you die, and then you're still violating the moral code because you caused the death of something. There are exceptions to all of the moral rules. There are exceptions to, and some of them are more horrific than others, like don't rape. Rape being totally bad. The number of situations where rape would be acceptable is really far out there. But you bring back to would it be morally justified to, rape somebody to save, all the occupants of a particular city? The discomfort felt by one single person, does that balance against everybody's lives? That's kind of mixing, asymptotes there, but at somewhere along that line, there is an answer to that. And it doesn't come from the Bible. It doesn't come from God. It doesn't come from any of that type of stuff. So, That then therefore refutes the third premise, which is therefore God exists. It's not an argument for God. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't fill in any gaps. We have reasons for why we do things the way we do in social groups. And those reasons are because for the group, they promote the best good stuff, the least ill will and the least harm to each other. And that's why we follow those. And that's because people function in certain ways. But not every group is going to feel the same way about it. Some people may, there may be social groups out there that say that, once you hit 60 years old, you're useless and we're just going to kill you off. In that social group, killing people at the age of 60 is perfectly acceptable. Not in our society, because our society has different values. But if morals came from this all-powerful, all-knowing, even just, we say maximally powerful and maximally knowing being, then it still fails that test. Because we don't have those rules set up from somewhere other than from within ourselves. So I think that's it. If I sound horrible, it's because I'm still sick. I did go to the doctor today, and I've got some antibiotics and a nasal spray. But they're in my wife's car. She picked them up from the store while she was running errands tonight, and she is not home yet. So I'll get those and hopefully take those before I go to bed, because I am freaking tired, and it's not nearly as late as it usually is. So, but that's it. Thanks for stopping by and listening to me rattle on about the moral argument for the existence of God. I was going to go back to Peter Kreeft's, and it just wasn't worth it. But the atheistic one is incompatible with there being a moral obligation, which is it's not true. The moral obligation exists subjectively within our social group and not from a moral. There's not an objective moral in the pragmatic sense of objective morals. So that's it. Like, comment, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And I will catch you next time. I'd have to go back and watch my last video to say what else I was going to do next, but I had a couple of ideas. But I want to get this one out here because I've been promising it for at least 2 videos now. So thanks a lot. And as I have my want to say, goodbye and hello, as always.
If it doesn't,